Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Once again, I'm here with chapter number 14, International Organizations in a Unipolar World. And all about this chapter is like we are going to do origin and evolution in the United Nations, purpose, structure, relevance, reform of the United Nations, jurisdiction of United Nations in a unipolar world, and United Nations in a unipolar world, how democratic and accountable are the new international organizations of global governance and non-governmental organization. What is the need of international organizations? Do you have any interference from the images? Now, the need of international organizations is like it would be not be wrong if I would say that to treat United Nations organization as Pinica for all the diseases. It is supposed to be cure for every problem of illness, and there are, however, several reasons why we need international organizations, like building durable structure to maintain international peace and security. And then United Nations General Assembly's recommendations are not binding. Then resolving the conflicts, the problems, the social conflicts, economic, environmental problems, and many more. And then like the international organization are also engaged in activities devoted to economic and social advancement of the world as a whole, and problems related to health also. Then economic growth of a balanced kind can be tackled if countries are not cooperating with one another, and providing ways to the international cooperation also. Yes, this is very important point. International cooperation. And above all, they help with the matters of war and peace. They also help countries to cooperate to make better living conditions for us all, to prevent international conflict and to facilitate cooperation among states. And if we say that international cooperation, so it gives us international cooperation in different ways. Firstly, if we say resources sufficient for our needs and can be provided only by international organizations such as AIDS and Health Fund and International Monetary Fund. Secondly, we need an infrastructure and services of trained staff to carry out various projects. Then thirdly, the international organization help members to have assistance in a fair manner, and the needs of Asian, African, and other developing countries get priority over those of other members. How to cooperate? An international organization produces information and ideas to cooperate and provides the following, like mechanism, rules, bureaucracy, confidence that cost will be shared, benefits will be divided. So honor the term and conditions of the agreements. What exactly it started from? The charter was signed by 51 nations in October 1945. The design is a map of the world, United Nations logo, and this was created by a team of designers during the United Nations Conference on International Organization in 45. And the design team was led by Oliver Lincoln Lundquist. So the design is a map of the world representing an azimuthal equidistant projection centered on the North Pole, inscribed in a wreath consisting of crossed conversionalized branches of the olive tree in gold on a field of smoke blue with all water areas in white. And the projection of the map extends to 60 degrees south latitude and includes five concentric circles. President Wilson, 14 points were open diplomacy, freedom of the seas, removal of economic barriers, then reduction of armaments and adjustment of colonial claims, conquered territories in Russia, preservation of Belgian sovereignty, restoration of French territory, redrawing of Italian frontiers, division of Austria-Hungary, redrawing of Balkan boundaries, limitation of Turkey and independent Poland, and then creation of an association of nations. And League of Nations in 19 origins political idealism of President Woodrow Wilson, an organization for resolving the conflicts before bloodshed and warfare. Now, in the aftermath of the First World War, the League of Nations was established at the Paris Peace Conference of June 20, 1919, and the Covenant of the League of Nations made up Part 1 of the Treaty of Versailles. The League began organizational work in the fall of 1919 and spending its first 10 months with a headquarter in London before moving to Geneva. And League of Nations few reasons for failure were USA isolationist feared high line would drag USA into international affairs and unnecessarily Russia attacked Persia in 1920 and LON did not help Persia. So any member could veto the decision. We need a multipolar world order. So the disintegration of former Soviet Union brought about a unipolar world, and it saw the end of bipolar world. There was now left only one superpower in the world, and we need multipolar world order. An order, a system in which all the states should have collective interest in bringing about peace and security in the world. In fact, the United States should not be the sole actor in all crisis situations. A threat to peace should have to be met by an international organization like the United Nations. The United Nations should be strengthened in solving social and economic problems as well. The League of Nations was born in the tragedy of First World War, but it failed when it had to deal acts of aggression in 1930. And in September 1939, World War II broke out. The hope that the League would be able to preserve peace was completely shattered. The United Nations is an international organization founded in 1945. But exactly, let's see how. It is currently made up of 193 member states. Its mission and work guided by the purposes and principles contained in its founding charter and implemented by various organs and specialized agencies. And its activities include maintaining international peace and security protection, human rights, delivering humanitarian aid, promoting sustainable development, and upholding international law. The evolution of United States, the origin, and the League of Nations, like as I said, 1920 to 39, League of Nations. It was born in the tragedy of First World War. So, the evolution of the United Nations was the Washington Declaration 1942. The name United Nations was devised by American President Franklin. And it was on 1st January 1942 that the representatives of 26 nations signed the United Nations Declaration at Washington. And Dumbarton Oaks Conference 1944, the representatives of Britain, America, Russia, and China met from 21st August to 24th September 44 at an estate known as Dumbarton Oaks near Washington. At the conference, draft of the United Nations Charter was formulated. The San Francisco Conference and the birth of the United Nations deliberations began at San Francisco in April of 45 to finalize the United Nations Charter. The United Nations Charter, as I already have explained it, that it was signed by 50 participating nations on 26 June 1941, and Poland was the only one who allowed to sign on 15th October 1945, thus raising the number of original members to a 51, and the charter came into force on 25th October 1945. So that is why October 24th is always celebrated as United Nations day throughout the world. So United Nations started functioning with 51 nations as the original members by the end of October 2011, and the total membership had increased in 193. Now let's talk about the objectives and purposes of the United Nations. The preamble and Article 1 of the Charter lay down the objectives and purposes of the United Nations. They are like to have succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to maintain international peace, and to develop friendly relations among nations, to achieve international cooperation and solving problems of economic, social, and cultural character. Like international peace and security means the people, like the countries, they should not have any kind of weapon war, and they must take the measures to remove all those threats as well, and to develop friendly relations among nations, to achieve international cooperation in solving problems of economic, social, and cultural character, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for international law and international treaties can be maintained. Now, what happens like when the cooperation of different countries have conflicts and they don't cooperate each other in terms of economy or social or cultural character? International organization is not an international government, but it behaves in that way that it tries to solve the problems of all the countries, because when the member countries they sit together, it just work like a parliament as we do in our Lok Sabha. It happens in General Assembly, and there all the problems are discussed, and then the common things are taken out, and then they try to solve the problems on the economic, social, and cultural aspects, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for international law and international treaties can be maintained. It is also to promote and encourage respect for human rights and dignity of individual. And the headquarters of United Nations is in New York City, USA, and the European office of the United Nations is in Geneva. So, objectives and values are of United Nations to maintain the international peace and security, and to promotion of human rights, fundamental freedoms as the international political, economic, and social cultural issues. Like this is also a very important point, that fundamental freedoms of the citizens are also discussed in United Nations organization, and the cooperation between states, both multilateral and bilateral relations, the epicenter of cooperation for domestic and global issues as well. The primary values of the United Nations: facilitation of international cooperation, promotion of dialogue between member states, adoption of peaceful means in the dispute settlement, and non intervention within the state's domestic unless there is a violation, and Chapter 7 in order to maintain global peace and security. Because the motive of United Nations is to maintain the peace in the world, that people should not have any kind of conflicts or the problems occur in the world, because they want to focus more on the development of the countries, not the global wars, or they have the matter of security as well, that people should not feel insecure in their own countries. So time to time they make the rules and regulations, and the agendas are being discussed in the meetings, and they just make the policies to maintain peace and security at global level. These are the principal organs of United Nations, like General Assembly, Secretariat, Security Council, Economic and Social Council, and International Court of Justice. Let's revise few things. Why are international organizations like the United Nations required? Because they help in matters of war and peace, and they also help countries to cooperate and make better living conditions for all. And which is the most important international organization? What is its image in the eyes of the people? The United Nations is generally regarded as the most important international organization in today's world, and in the eyes of the like many people all over the world, the United Nations is indispensable and represents the great hope of humanity for peace and progress. These are the very short questions. The emblem of United Nations has a world map with olive branches around it, signifying world peace. And Boutros Ghali declared the US-led invasion of Iraq as an illegal act. This is false. And the rewrites intends to, after correcting it, is social and economic issues are dealt with by many agencies other than United Nations General Assembly and Security Council. And it could be written like war and peace and differences between member states are discussed in the United Nations General Assembly as well as the Security Council. And there is match the column also United Nations most visible public figure, and it relates to Secretary General and provides loans and grant to the member countries. It relates to World Bank and sets of the rules for global trade. It relates with the WTO, and unmatched financial power relates to USA. And why did League of Nations establish? It was created in 1920 after the First World War to provide a forum of resolving international disputes. Let's come back to the chapter as we were discussing, like six organs of the United Nations. The General Assembly. All the members of the United Nations are members of the General Assembly, and it is just like Lok Sabha when all the members sit together and discuss any questions relating to peace and security, and it elects the non permanent member of the Security Council and the member of the Economic and the Social Council. The General Assembly, there are 193 UN member states, and each with a vote in the General Assembly. And the function of the General Assembly is to discuss, debate, and make recommendations on subjects pertaining to international peace and security. And it includes the development, the disarmament, human rights, international law, and peaceful arbitrations of disputes between nations, and elects the non permanent members of the Security Council and other United Nations bodies, such as the Human Rights Council, and appoints the Secretary General based on Security Council recommendation. And it also appoints the Secretary General above the recommendation of Security Council. The members of International Court of Justice are elected by General Assembly and by the Security Council. Each member state has one vote, and decisions are important. Questions such as elections of the non permanent members of the Security Council require a two-thirds majority of the members present and voting, and decisions and other questions are made by a simple majority of the members present and voting.